Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, we've got a very interesting session, one that I'm particularly interested, going back to nature and the benefits of nature. David Skinner's an old friend of Monday Night Live, done many presentations or several presentations for us, which have all been fantastically well received. And David's been away coaching at the Leadership Trust or Ross-on-Wye for the last week, spending 14 hours a day. So he's recovering from that and presenting to us today. David and I were talking about this over a cup of coffee yesterday, and it's important that anyone watching this on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast doesn't misunderstand anything David talks about, because sometimes nature's talked about as medicine, and it's not medicine. And if you're not well, then you go to your GP or your medical practitioner. But there's all sorts of research about getting out into nature, which David's going to share with us. We did talk about whether some people would see this as woo-woo. It's certainly not woo-woo. It's common sense that makes a lot of sense. David, welcome to Monday Night Live. While you're just introducing yourself, I'll share the screen. David, you're probably muted and you need to unmute yourself, if I was guessing. Yeah, are you there?
I'm there now. Is that better?
Okay. Brilliant. Yep, that's great.
Thanks very much, Derek, for the intro. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I've grown up with nature around me. I hadn't realized it at the time, but I've spent most of my holidays when I was being brought up in Edinburgh and growing up in Edinburgh in the mountains of Scotland, doing various crazy things in the summer and the winter and in the thick cloud and the whiteouts or whatever weather Scotland throws at you. And I've really gone on holiday to places where there's a lot of nature around, and much of what I do now is involved with the natural world being around me. As I say, I never really thought about it much. But nowadays we hear an enormous amount about being in nature, being good for our well-being and our mental health. And it's dawned on me, is this just self-confirming intuition, or is it a real effect, or is it just a trend? And if it is real, then how do we know? How do we measure it? What's the mechanism? And how can we reproduce it when we need it? So I think it's important for all of us, because if it is good for us, then we can improve our health and well-being and our longevity and our immune system, whatever age we are, just by taking advantage of this free resource that's all around us. So that's really what got me started on this. Now, there is a particularly good book about it by a lady called Kathy Willis, who's a professor of biodiversity at Oxford University. Used to be head of science in Kew Gardens, which is the major garden in London. And she noticed how a walk in the park cleared her head when she was stressed or tired, and asked herself the same questions. What research is out there, and what does it tell us? So if we go on to the first slide, Derek.
This one, David, or the next
That's
one?
the one. No, that's the one.
Okay.
I want to cover really three major topics. Well, what do we do with our senses, and what impact do they have on our metabolism? What does walking in nature do for us? And what does natural dirt do for us? We live in a very sterile environment, if we believed all the adverts we saw. But is there something good about dirt? So those are the three topics that we'll cover today. And I'll aim to talk briefly about them and then give you some idea of the sort of research that's being done to give some meat to the bones of it. Let's start with sight on the next slide.
Sorry, something's going. Your AV man's working the switches too quickly. Keep going.
That's the one. There's lots you could talk about on sight, but we'll focus on color. There's stuff about shape and all sorts of things, but question there is, do the colors we see have a physiological effect on us? If so, what? And I'll just touch on three studies that conclude or point all in the same direction, that the color green has a positive physiological effect on our metabolism. 2015 Spanish study over 2,500 kids age 8, and the researchers went to a lot of detail and assessed the amount of green environment they were exposed to at home, on their way to school, and at school. They then gave them cognitive tests of memory and attention every 3 months for a year. So they created a baseline. And after adjusting for all sorts of factors in terms of socioeconomic and other issues, they concluded quite clearly that the amount of green space the kids encountered uh, directly correlated with their better progress in terms of their memory and attention. And the most important aspect was the amount of green that was around their school. If you go to the next slide, there's a little bit of data on that, just to illustrate it. Um, this shows the results across the 4 visits over the year in terms of working memory for the kids. So the ones who had the lowest level of greenness around their lives is the dotted line, which shows some growth in terms of working memory over the test period, but 3 times the growth for those who had the highest amount of green. And that's just an example. The other aspects of the test showed exactly the same things. So over the course of a year for 8-year-olds, their memory, working memory and attention is substantially better. And if you think about the impact of that in terms of what that then enables them to do to progress more in their learning, it's really quite pivotal. So you can imagine that that could have some really important consequences in terms of town planning for schools, in terms of exposing people to green space. If you go back to the previous slide, I'll just touch on 2 other bits of research. Um,
David, is it the color green, or is it actually green in nature and green leaves on?
uh, well, I'm not sure on what the conclusion was on. I don't think this test looked at that. They just assessed the amount of natural green that was around them. So I presume that relates to natural green. There are other tests which, in terms of flower plants, and saying, well, which in terms of pot plants, do is there a difference between artificial? I mean, you can get some really realistic artificial plants and real plants, and you only get the positive effect from the real plants, even if you can't tell the difference, which I thought was quite interesting. But
Yeah.
that isn't covered on this. If we can just head back 1 slide. Oh no, you're there. Um, yeah, there's another test in from the University of Illinois in 2016, and that was much smaller, 94 students in 3 groups, and they put them into identical classrooms, with the exception that one had a window looking onto green space, another looking onto a blank wall, and another that had no window at all. And then they gave them reading, speech, and subtraction tests over the period of the research. And they measured the stress of the students through body temperature, skin conductance, and HRV, and they all had the same baseline. And the kids who were in the green classroom showed demonstrably better results, and the stress markers that they had from doing the test recovered much quicker than the ones who were in the other 2. So again, it's only 94 students, but it's all pointing in the same direction. And finally, there's a classic piece of research from 1984 in Pennsylvania of over patients in post-operative recovery. And some of them were put into rooms which had a view over trees, and some of them which had rooms which had a view over a wall. And the ones looking over trees had faster post-operative recovery and needed fewer painkillers, so they were out of hospital quicker, and uh, their need for pain relief was lower. So again, this is all scratching the surface, but it's all directionally suggesting to you that green is a great color to be exposed to. Let's go to the next slide, Derek.
That
Um,
one, David.
that's it, the sound. So that's sight. How about sound? Well, there's a lot of research suggesting that the natural sounds improve mood, improve cognitive performance, decrease perceived pain, decrease heart rate, and other stress-related markers. Um, there was a meta study done of 18 pieces of research by the University of Ottawa in 2020, and that consistently that was trying to look at the effect of the conclusions of the research on the effect of natural sounds on our positive feelings, positive impact on health, and positive subjective assessments, and on reducing negative conditions such as stress, pain, annoyance. And what the sort of metrics they looked at were blood pressure, heart rate, skin conductance, cortisol levels, perceived pain levels, anxiety, self-reported anxiety. And they consistently showed across the 18 pieces of research significant improvements in health, positive feeling, and reductions in stress and pain, particularly water sounds. Sounds of water had the greatest impact on the positive things, such as health and positive feelings. And funnily enough, birdsong had the impact on reducing pain, perceived pain, stress, annoyance, anxiety markers. Um, so that made me think when you're going, I'm out cycling a lot, and I see a lot of people out taking a walk in the forests, and most of them have headphones on, or are looking at their phone, or they're talking to their friends. But the ones who have headphones on, listening to music or to a podcast, are missing out on all those benefits. They just aren't hearing the sounds that are around them and getting those effects. Um, so that's a quick snapshot of sound. If we move on to the next one, smell. Um, I've never really thought about it much, but sight and sound are a bit different to smell. Um, Sight and sound, we get input through our senses. Um, we um, get that is converted into electrical impulses in our brain, which then has an impact on our nervous system as we send signals around the body as a result of that. Um, Smell is the same in that we have our olfactory sensors that go into the brain. Is Godfrey?
Brilliant, Carl. You're a top
There you
man.
go.
Okay.
Brilliant.
So hang on, David. Yeah, Keith, if you can cut it at that point, that will be brilliant. Thanks. We're back on. David.
Right. Well, that's the slide around sound, which I don't think you probably had up, really highlighting the effects of sound and the impact of water and bird sounds. And it's not all bird sounds. It's uh, the ones like blackbirds and robins. I don't know. Presumably there's some similar equivalents in the States. The more musical ones, as opposed to crows and the harsher sounds of birds. If we go to the next site of smell. Um, So the difference with smell is that not only does it send signals through to the brain, but we inhale the compounds that are in the smell because we're breathing it in, and those compounds enter our bloodstream directly. And we'll show you a slide in a second about that. But what is it we smell? Well, there's a whole family of compounds called terpenes, which have characteristic smells. So vanilla smell has the same compound in it in vanilla pods, tonka beans, vanilla grass, and others that have sort of vanilla tones to them. And we'll just talk briefly. I'll talk briefly about four of them. Pine forests. I think most of us have experienced walking through a pine forest, maybe after a shower of rain, and the really intense smell that's quite evocative of the smell of pine as you go through it. And principal compounds involved in that are a family of compounds called pinenes and limonene, which are also in citrus. Um, and there is, well, if we go into the next slide, you can see a little bit of research. It's quite a busy slide, but it basically shows how the intensity of pinene in the atmosphere gets transferred into the blood. So this is a study, I think, from the University of Chiba near Tokyo. And so the top level, you don't need to worry about the detail. It's really the visual image. The top level shows that peak of alpha pinene, which is the base level of alpha pinene in the atmosphere in the pine forest in the research they were doing. The middle one is a level of pinene in the bloodstream of the participants before they went for a walk in the forest. And the bottom one shows the level of pinene in the bloodstream of the participants after they've been in the forest. And you can see that transfer directly happening, that through inhalation, that pinene is in the bloodstream. So that sort of quite powerfully demonstrates the difference between sight and sound and smell. If
David, that looks like about a 33% increase from those graphs.
Yeah, yeah.
After,
The relative amounts, but yeah, it's
yeah. So
significant.
yeah. So
So
that goes back to Tim's forest bathing, isn't it? Walking in
yeah.
the pine forest. Is it pine forest? What about oak trees? And is there any?
Oak trees won't have alpha pinene in them,
Right.
but I guess they'll have other compounds in them.
Mm.
Uh, uh, okay, if we head back to the previous slide. So pinene gets into our bloodstream, and um, that's associated in various pieces of research with lower heart rate, improved heart function, reduction in inflammatory markers. And the University of Chiba did a little test where research where they asked participants to inhale air for 90 seconds. Um, and some of them had air infused with pinene and some of them didn't. And those with the pinene consistently showed the lowering heart rate, HRV, and their self-assessment of mood and anxiety improved as well. Other studies talk about alpha brainwaves suggesting indicating greater levels of relaxation. Um, and so there are various studies for other compounds in forests, but that gives you just a flavor of why forests are good for you. Worth mentioning lavender. Traditionally, that's people say, "Oh, that helps you sleep." Well, does it? Studies from a university in Taipei looked at the impact of sleep pattern and showed participants sleeping in an atmosphere that had infused with lavender, looking at their brain waves through their sleep, had deeper, more uninterrupted sleep. And they suggested that the chemicals in lavender uh, influence the nervous system and the endocrine system to create greater relaxation. Um, the opposite for rosemary. Active ingredient there is one terpene called 1,8-cineol, and that acts on enzymes in our system that block our ability to be alert and aroused. So it stops that capability being blocked, and therefore we become more alert and aroused. And there's a piece of research from nurses on shift showing that they demonstrate that when they the ones who are exposed to rosemary reported on night shift, that they were more alert and had less issues with wanting to fall asleep. Citrus, limonene, a broad range of effects on inflammatory respiratory disorders, so bronchial disorders, asthma, and things like that, suggests that it has anti-inflammatory effects on those. So there's a lot of research around. Some of them it's a bit small, some of it's not double-blind tests, but they're all sort of broadly pointing in the same direction. So that's our senses. Um, uh, I've just managed to get rid of that. That's it. If we go on to the next slide, we have walks in the park. Does it make us feel better, or is it just a sort of imagined effect? Um, there's lots of research around that which suggests that does have a measurable effect on our cognitive performance. So one from the University of Michigan in 2008 gave had a number of students participating, and they were given a cognitively demanding test, a number reversal test. So I give you 132, you have to reverse it and tell me 231. Gradually, the numbers get bigger, and you can see the stress markers increasing in the individual as they are taking that test. So you assess their response to start with, then you give them half of them a 50-minute walk through a park and half of them a 50-minute walk through a city, and then they retake the test. And they do it a number of times. The city ones walking in the park ones walking in the city, good weather, bad weather. So adjusting for whatever they can do. And when they retake the test after they come back, the ones who'd been in the park had a 20% better performance than the ones who'd been off in the city. So that's pretty significant. So if you think back to Kathy Willis with her walk in the park when she was feeling a bit stressed out, there's an example. And that talks to a theory from a guy called Kaplan, or attention restoration theory, which suggests that our ability to focus our attention and concentrate with focused attention is a limited resource. I mean, we all talk about people concentrate a lot at the start of a lecture and they lose their concentration by the end, and that's an example. And when it runs out, we need to replenish it. And we do this by turning our directed attention off and allowing our minds to gently engage with whatever is around us and be with curiosity. So, walk in the forest allows us to do that. We're not always being triggered by man-made noises and sounds. We're getting the benefit of all the greenness and the bird song and the water sounds. And so long as we don't use our attention as we go through that, it's a great way to replenish your attention. So again, doesn't work if you've got your phone on or your headphones on. Doesn't really work if you're going around talking to a friend. Just let your mind drift to whatever attracts you, and in that way you restore your directed, focused attention capability. So that's a quick vignette of walks in the park. So let's move on to getting dirty. Uh, we have trillions of bacteria living in and on us, and they're critical to our health. I hadn't realized it, but apparently our body makes only 11 out of the 20 amino acids that we need to operate as a human being. The rest comes from the microbes in our body. And a diverse and healthy body biome supports our overall health, well-being, and resilience. And that's uh, the theory, that's the proposition. But does it really stand up? I mean, it relies on the presumption, which I think has been fairly well shown, that natural environments have a greater diversity than man-made ones, and that whatever environment we're in leads the diversity of environment of population of microbes in our body. So if we're in a natural environment, we're likely to have a more diverse population of microbes within us, rather than if we're always in a man-made environment. And that leads to the suggestion, which research points to, but I mean, you couldn't say it is a proven fact, that we have a more resilient and effective immune system as a result. But one little piece of research, Finnish children were uh, put into two groups in a nursery environment or primary school environment. One was a sterile sandpit, the sort of thing that is sort of politically correct. That you can't catch any horrible diseases out of it. And one with a sandpit enhanced with microbially diverse soil, i.e., soil from the forest. And they did that every day for 28 days. And the research tested their blood and stool samples after 0, 14, and 28 days. They also did skin tests, skin resistance tests, etc. And they found that they particularly looked at the number of T cells in the bloodstream, which are involved in our immune function. Two T cells that we have are called interleukin 10 and interleukin 17. They help manage our immune inflammatory response. So 10 is anti-inflammatory, 17 is pro-inflammatory. So we need a good balance. And the kids in the diverse sandpit showed a significant increase in IL-10, a significant decrease in IL-17. So the excess of 17 is involved in a number of autoimmune conditions, so rheumatoid arthritis and things like that. So just by playing in a microbially diverse forest type environment, the kids had a decrease in their inflammatory cells. The placebo had no change. The kids also had a higher level of diversity of microbes on their skin. If you go to the next slide, that just gives a tiny bit of data from that study. Again, there's quite a lot on it, so don't get too fussed with it. But the top four are different families of microbacteria, and the black bars are the placebos, and are the diverse ones, and the grey ones are the placebos. And these are the tests after 0, 14, and 28 days. And in each case, you can see the diverse kids in the diverse sandpit showing increases, and they've gone from being below the placebo to significantly higher than placebo. And the bottom left, somewhat confusingly, changes the black one in this case is the placebo, showing reduction in IL-10 cells, and the grey one shows the increase in IL-10 cells after 28 days. So,
So for people listening to this without the benefit of the slides, it's showing really that with with microbes and exposure to the microbes, it's much healthier, despite the fact the Health and Safety Commission would never let the kids play in these microbes. When we had a coffee yesterday, David, you told me that I should be gardening without gloves on, which
yeah, yeah.
is that right?
Take your gardening gloves off, get dirt under your fingernails, because some of the other research talks about how just rubbing your hands with dirt increases the microbial diversity in your biome. So getting your hands dirty is a good thing as long as you're sensible about it. um, but if you're having said that, if you're going to be pruning a spiky bush, you're probably still okay with the gloves.
Yeah, we better put another one of those health warnings in here that we're not advising people to do that.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
Um,
I
but
will say
that's
that we're not advising anyone to do any of those things,
yes.
but just be interested in the research.
I mean, I suppose whatever you think about the research, it is very clear that these interventions have an impact that's measurable and consistent, whatever your interpretation of it is. Okay, if we head on to the next slide, really just summing up the conclusion when I said at the start, I've been around nature and never really thought much about it, and is it really good for us? Well, it seems to me pretty clearly that it has three benefits. It has the capability to reduce harm. So, examples of post-operative pain. There are other examples where people recovering from cesareans have birdsong played through earphones or just nothing through earphones, and their self-reported post-operative pain after the cesareans is much lower right the way through the process, and there are many others like that. Reduces stress, multiple examples we've talked about today, improves mood, reduces inflammation, or has the capacity to reduce inflammation, restores our capacity, replenishes our attention, supports our alertness, two examples, and builds resilience. So it appears to have an impact on our immune function. It appears to build our cognitive capacity and our working memory and our mood, reducing anxiety. So there's a whole load of things, and it seems I always try and think about if I understand the mechanism behind something or have a broad understanding of the mechanism, then I can reproduce those effects more consistently and predict their effects. And that's, I think, what this tells me. So when I go out now, I listen a bit harder to what's going around me.
Yeah.
I might touch the bark of a tree and think about it. I will have gentle curiosity to whatever is attracting my attention when I'm out. And even if I don't do that, I'm probably still feeling better because it's green out there. Um, so that sort of leads into thinking, what can you do about it? Well, so can you do anything practical to make your life better now as a result? Well, walk in green spaces. The suggestion from Kathy Willis is 120 minutes a week, at least 3 times a week, for at least 20 minutes each time. Turn your phone off, put it away. It'll help you replenish your attention. Ditch the headphones when you're out. Seems to be an epidemic of headphones in this world. Put away your gardening gloves. Put a bit of lavender in your bedroom and have some pot plants indoors. And that's really just a quick run through. Is nature good for you? Yes. And here's some things you can do about it.
Wow, David, that's absolutely fantastic. You've really opened our eyes there. You've done a lot of research into some of these studies and made us think big time. So I'll be switching the recording off now. How do people get hold of you if they've got any questions on these topics?
Oh, they could send me an email or you could
LinkedIn, I guess, is best, is it?
yeah, you could do it on LinkedIn if you're connected up. Uh, If not, you could email me,
Or contact me,
or
and
contact you. Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
pass it on to David. Can I ask members of Monday Night Live to give David the usual vote of a thanks for a fantastic, fabulous talk, so brilliantly researched. So thanks, David, and we'll enjoy your next venture. I can see why you go cycling all over the South Downs and in Scotland and all sorts of things. Congratulations on the talk. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Pleasure.